Hello everyone. My name is Mary Seremet and I'm an assistant professor of theater at Mary Baldwin University in Stanton, Virginia. I am thrilled to be here introducing Troilus and Cressida for Shakespeare 2020. For reasons that I hope will become clear during this introduction, Troilus and Cressida is one of my very favorite plays. It's important to acknowledge at the outset though that this play has problems, and I want to be clear that I love it because of its problems and not in spite of them. Today, I'll be talking about a few of those hiccups and giving you a sneak peek into the tents of Shakespeare's Trojan epic. While the title of this play might set us up to expect a love story, a la Romeo and Juliet, the plot of Troilus and Cressida is far more occupied with the intricacies of managing a long and stultifying war. While the complicated romance between the title characters figures prominently in the play's plot structure, that is mostly due to the ways that this love plot intersects with the larger narrative around the spoils of war and the concerns of honor, valor, and cynicism that the play trades in. Most of the play's primary characters are kings, generals, soldiers, and war profiteers, and as a result, we see Troilus and Cressida's short-lived relationship play out across the larger landscape of the Trojan War. Now, Troilus and Cressida is set in the later years of the Trojan War, and in fact, Shakespeare's play begins in media res. That is, the Trojan War has already been going on for 7 years when Shakespeare picks up the story. That's right, for 7 long years, the Greeks and Trojans have been fighting, following the Trojan prince Paris's abduction of Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, from her Greek husband Menelaus. When the play begins, the war has essentially stalled, with armies from the Trojan and Greek sides stuck in holding patterns in their camps, rather than duking it out on the battlefield. The soldiers occupy their time hanging out in their tents, squabbling with each other, and making general nuisances of themselves. As Shakespeare's play unfolds, you will meet many of antiquity's heavy hitters. The Greek forces are led by their general Agamemnon. The Greek army as well includes Menelaus, the unfortunate husband of Helen, now of Troy, as well as Ulysses, Ajax, Diomedes, and Achilles. In contrast, the Trojan faction is led by King Priam, with his superstar sons Hector, Paris, and Troilus at the forefront. As the narrative unfolds, the Grecian general Agamemnon spends much of his energy trying to guilt Achilles onto the battlefield. Now, in mythology, Achilles is a famed soldier, celebrated for his bravery and his mettle in combat. He is even the central character of Homer's Iliad and is considered the greatest of the Greek warriors. The Achilles we encounter in Shakespeare's play, however, is a different story. Shakespeare's Achilles refuses to participate in battle and spends his time lounging with his friend and possible lover, Patroclus, rather than answering challenges. Agamemnon and his general Ulysses manipulate Achilles to enter the battle, inflaming his pride by manufacturing a conflict with Ajax, a rival Trojan hero. Agamemnon succeeds in rousing Achilles' pride and getting him to spar with Ajax, but their hand-to-hand fight quickly fizzles when Achilles and Ajax discover that they are cousins. They therefore decide to feast together rather than fight. Indeed, throughout Troilus and Cressida, battles frequently fizzle out, challenges go unmet, and soldiers sit on the sidelines waiting for things to happen. For much of the play, the tension between the Grecian and Trojan armies dissipates before it reaches crisis, creating a cycle of what I like to call Combatis interruptus. At this point, you might be wondering, just how interesting is it to watch armies repeatedly find themselves on the precipice of conflict, only to have it fade out to nothing almost as quickly as it began? If you are asking this question, then I think you've hit exactly on the central theme of Shakespeare's play. War. What exactly is it good for? Shakespeare masterfully sets up this cycle of tension and release throughout the twinned plots of Troilus and Cressida. And then, just as we are lulled into a false sense of security, he breaks his own conventions and has the momentum ramp up drastically through 2 key events. First, In the love narrative, the Trojan leaders decide to give Cressida to the Grecian camp in exchange for a Trojan prisoner of war. While in the larger war narrative, Achilles is finally prompted to return to battle only after his beloved Patroclus is killed by Hector. A series of successful and brutal skirmishes follow, which conclude the play, during which Achilles catches Hector and kills him in cold blood outside of the accepted rules of engagement. The silliness and stupor of the play's first half finds its legs in the brutal and cynical success of its final act and leaves the audience unsettled. Just as Shakespeare's play began in the middle of the action, it ends before the war reaches a conclusion. The conquest of Troy is unfinished, and the play ends with all of its loose ends unraveling. Troilus and Cressida are both alive at the play's conclusion, but their bond has been broken beyond repair under the wheels of war. Now, with all this in mind, what genre would we say that Troilus and Cressida represents? This is a question that has baffled critics and scholars and theater makers since the play was written. Consider, for example, that Troilus and Cressida was included within the 1623 First Folio, but it was left off of the First Folio's table of contents. This suggests that the play may have been a late addition to the First Folio. Inside of the folio, Troilus and Cressida is sandwiched right in between the history plays and the tragedies. In a way, given this precarious placement, it's perhaps not surprising that we still aren't entirely sure what to do with this play now. As you take up the mantle of Shakespeare's Troilus and Cressida, here are some things that you might watch for. First, this play features love triangles for days, and you might hone in on a triad of these triangles in particular. There's Troilus, Cressida, and Diomedes. Then there's Paris, Helen, and Menelaus. And finally, Patroclus, Achilles, and Ulysses. What kinds of love do these triangles depict? And which triangles does Shakespeare seem to promote empathy for throughout the narrative? Conversely, which triangles become cautionary tales? Finally, what is the place of love inside of war in the first place? And what overlaps does this play highlight between the two things? Second, I believe that this play offers a masterclass in staging gaze, as in what happens when people look at each other and really take each other in. Of course, this play obviously stages some of the more problematic elements associated with the male gaze. Consider that when Cressida is held captain by the Grecian Diomedes, the first thing he does is take her to the Grecian camp and allows all the men to kiss her, quote, in general. As a palliative to this, I suggest that this play also provides opportunities to stage the female gaze in contrast. Shakespeare's play doesn't just invite this, but it literally calls for it. You will see this highlighted in the parade scene, where Cressida and Pandarus watch the men show off, and they discuss who is the cutest, or the strongest, or the bravest. How do characters take each other inside of this world, and what is the impact of the observations they perform? Finally, you might think about the ways that this play unpacks the notion of consent in fascinating ways, especially through the figure of Cressida. Cressida gets a bad historical rap, as she's perceived to have been unfaithful to her lover Troilus. As you read Shakespeare's version of the story, however, you might consider what, if any, alternatives the play presents to Cressida. At the play's outset, after all, she has been left by her father in the charge of her uncle, who then gives her to Troilus. Troilus's brothers turn around and give her to the Grecian army. I've used the passive voice here intentionally because I think Shakespeare's version of this story stages Cressida as an object intentionally to call attention to the ways that war can reduce our humanity and take away our agency. What light, then, does Shakespeare's play shed on Cressida, and how might we understand this better from our contemporary context? So with all that in mind, I invite you into the world of Shakespeare's Troilus and Cressida. It has been such a thrill to share this play with you today, and I wish you all the best on your Trojan adventure.